Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight. I'm Mike Kenichi, and I'm delighted to have this guest back on the show. He was on with us probably close to a year ago. He's a best-selling author, and he's going to talk all about the final book that he's releasing from his Dancing Trilogy series. And we're going to look forward to talking to that. He's a terrific human being and a credit to authors everywhere, the one and only Nelson Aspen. And
Oh,
Nelson,
that's a
thank you.
lovely introduction. Thank you, Mike. Nice to be
Thank
back.
you.
Good to see you.
Thank you for coming on again. And it really is an honor. And Nelson, this is going to be the final edition of the Dancing Between the Raindrops trilogy. So talk to me a little bit about, take people back to how it all got started with this trilogy and the final edition and what we could expect.
All right. Well, depending on how good your microphones are, you're talking to me from my New York City apartment, and I'm hearing some sirens go by because that's New York City, and that's the world we live in. So I apologize for any ambient noise you may encounter. But yeah, I mean, I think last year I was here talking to you about my Titanic book, The
Yeah.
Kindred Spirit. I have been cranking out these books. I'm like Jackie Collins, and all my books have just as much sex as Jackie Collins books, except for one special book we'll talk about later. But yeah, it was an amazing year with Kindred Spirits. But before that, I had written the original Dancing Between the Raindrops books, which I was very flattered spawned a sequel, and the story wasn't finished. So part three completes the trilogy. And the origin of Dancing Between the Raindrops is because when I was in my teens and early 20s and had just moved to New York City as a teenager. I was 17 when I moved to New York. And I would come home and I'd tell my parents these wild adventures that I was having in New York City. What I could tell them, I mean, there were plenty of adventures I couldn't tell them about, and I could never have written these books if my parents were still with me, because I don't know that they would have approved. But my dad would look and he'd shake his head and he'd hear of my escapades, and he'd say, "It's like you're dancing between the raindrops." And that's an expression that has always been a part of my life. And I thought that would be the perfect name for well, it's almost an autobiography. I have fictionalized it sufficiently. I've changed a few names. I've arranged sequences a little bit, mostly to protect the guilty. I don't need to protect the innocent, but I need to protect the guilty.
Right, exactly. And you mentioned Jackie, and I know um, obviously a writing mentor to you. I mean, throughout your career, just talk about how invaluable that friendship has been. Never mind just the lessons that you learned.
Yeah, well, may she rest in peace. But she was an icon. Everybody, certainly of my age, knew who Jackie Collins was, and she wrote so dramatically and excitedly about the Hollywood that she knew. So of course I knew of Jackie Collins before I ever moved to Hollywood, and I moved to Hollywood in 1990. And one of my many, 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 many survival jobs at one point was working in a bookstore. And I'll never forget the day I was, I don't know, whatever I was doing in the bookstore, stacking books or unloading books or ringing up at the register. But I saw a limousine pull up outside in the parking lot, and out of the limousine comes Jackie Collins, instantly recognizable. She marches into the store with a notepad and pencil, and she goes over to the fiction wall, and she starts immediately taking inventory of her books. And I think she wrote 32 New York Times bestsellers, something insane like that. I've only written 12. I guess I have a ways to go. So she then marched over to the manager's desk to tell him what books, they were low on, what he needed to reorder. And I would point out that on the bookshelf, if you see a stack of books like this on the shelf, you're only seeing the spine of the book. But if you turn the books this way, it shows off the title, the cover of the book. So she was actually turning books around so that they would face out for people browsing in the bookstore. I never forgot that. I never forgot that experience. Then I ran into her in a professional capacity. I was no longer working in a bookstore, but I ran into her in a professional capacity and reminded her of that encounter. And she said, "Well, you have to sell your books. You don't write your books for them to sit on a shelf. You write your books to sell them so that you get them into the hands of the readers for whom you wrote it. And you've got to be proactive. And she taught me a lot about the business of being a writer. She said, you must always have a case of books nearby, be ready to sell them. She says, don't give them away. You earned, whatever the cost of the book is, $10, $20, $30. Take the money. Don't be too proud to get your hands dirty with cash, make a little change. It's a lemonade stand. You got to sell the product. And then later, when I had written a few books and saw her again, I actually was interviewing her at that point in the late 90s. And she said to me, you must always put sex in your book. She'd asked me if there was sex in my book. And I said, well, not this last one that I wrote. And she goes, well, you must put it in, because even people, it doesn't have to be pornographic. It just has to be steamy. Because even people who don't want to read about sex want to know that there's sex in there so they can judge you. They'll either enjoy it or they'll judge you. But either way, you will have sold a book. So I stuck to that advice. And the problem was, book one, Dancing Between the Raindrops, chronicles my life in New York City in the 80s, from the age of 18 to 28. I wasn't finished, so I had to do the sequel, Dancing Between the Raindrops, The Hollywood Years. And this is my 22 years in Los Angeles. All the celebrities I interviewed, the O.J. Simpson trial, which I was very involved with the O.J. Simpson case. As I said, I changed a few names. O.J.'s name is still O.J. in the book. And then finally, the one that has just come out, Dancing Between the Raindrops, Happily Ever After, with a question mark, because I don't want to spoil it for you. So it's Happily Ever After. And the trick was, Happily Ever After starts when I'm 50 years old. And I had to still make it as steamy as the first two. And I'm happy to say that I was still having a steamy life well into my 50s.
Right. And, interesting, you talk about the different people you covered and you talked about O.J. Simpson. Let me ask you this. Being a writer, but trying to be as objective as you possibly can, did you find it hard to cover somebody like O.J. when all the evidence pointed to him doing this? I mean, did you try to give him the benefit of the doubt, or how did you go about that?
Well, I suggest you'll have to read the Hollywood Years book to find out the intimate details of all of that. But as a reporter, I've always been extremely diligent about fact checking, especially because I did the entertainment beat, and it's so easy to get sidetracked with the gossip that a lot of the important details and facts get left out of things, which is why when I was asked to write my autobiography, I said, well, I can't do it. I'll never remember everything as meticulously as it needs to be for an official autobiography. That's why I semi-fictionalized my Raindrops books. So I'm off the hook for having to get everything absolutely perfect. But when it came to OJ, I was not involved with the O.J. Simpson case as a reporter. I was personally involved with that because one of my many survival jobs was I was the maitre d' at the Mezzaluna restaurant, which is where the whole O.J. Simpson double murder played out, through the Mezzaluna restaurant in Brentwood, California. And I was the maitre d', and my cousin was the manager. And my cousin Keith was in a romantic relationship with Nicole Brown Simpson. And she was divorced from OJ at the time, but OJ was still obsessed with her and would come into the restaurant. He was very intimidating. For all of his public charm, he was a very scary individual to be around. And when the murder of Nicole and Ron Goldman, a waiter at Mezzaluna, happened, when we heard about it, the first thing I thought was, oh my God, my cousin Keith has been murdered. And my mother heard it on the news in Pennsylvania, and she was bananas. She thought it was me. She thought, oh, well, because the story was that Nicole's mother had forgotten her glasses. Ron, the waiter, took the glasses over to the house. Wrong place, wrong time. And my belief only, I mean, he was acquitted by a jury of his peers, but I believe that OJ was lying in wait for Nicole and Keith. He had been threatening and violent with Keith in the past, and it made sense. So poor Ron Goldman, and God, poor Nicole. And it's hard to believe it's been so many years, because she's forever that young, beautiful girl in my mind. But OJ's no longer with us to deny it anymore. So we'll see.
Yeah, it was crazy back then. But I mean, that's the things that when you work all these years, and it's interesting to me, Nelson, because at a time when you were in New York City, you mentioned from 18 to 28, the 1980s. That's when I was a kid, and I just remember how popular. I mean, New York's always been popular, but I just remember New York was like everything back then. I mean, it was like nothing I ever saw. When I would leave Connecticut, it's so surprising because it's only like an hour and 10 minutes from me. But when I would get to New York, I'd be like, oh my God, what a city, what a, place, just the like personalities people had. I mean, it was amazing. So, I mean, that had to be something special for you being
Well,
in New
I
York.
still feel that way about New York, frankly, which is why I'm back here. I mean, I lived in LA for 22 years because of my career. And I say 22 years in Los Angeles, you do less time for murder. So the minute I could get back to New York, I did. I came back to New York full time in 2012. And I'm personally, I can't tell you about the spoiler alert for the book, but personally, I am living my happily ever after. And that feeling you describe as a kid, I felt as a kid too. I grew up in Philadelphia. And I was a child actor, so I was constantly in New York for auditions and jobs and things like that. And my mother took me to a lot of Broadway shows, so I was very clear on New York is where I needed to end up. But I still feel like that when I leave New York, even if it's to go on a vacation. When I'm at the airport and I look at the skyline that I'm leaving, I'm like, why am I leaving New York? I'm still in love with it. And I wish that for you too. I want you to recapture that feeling that you had when you were a kid and spend more time in New York.
Yeah, definitely. And Nelson, I was thinking about this. You brought it up a little earlier. And I know like it was, it wasn't a derogatory term, but I really do feel with these books, your parents, even if they didn't agree with everything, they would really appreciate the passion you have and the effort that you've put into everything. And I really think like they would be completely proud of this book, these books in the series. So I really believe that, we're all our own worst critics, but I think your parents would be smiling if they saw these right now.
I have no doubt that they are smiling from somewhere and grateful they weren't here to read it and have to deal with their friends saying, what? Because I had the most supportive parents that God ever gave to a child. I really lucked out in the parents department. That doesn't mean we didn't have conflicts over the years, as you do. My dad was a very macho, ex-military, tough surgeon guy. I was his only son. That led to some butting of heads, but we always were very clear on how much we loved each other. I always knew I could count on him. And parents are a tricky business. Family is a tricky business, but that's really kind of you to say and acknowledge. And yeah, I know that they are watching over me. And it's funny, when I got married, my wedding ring is actually my parents' two wedding bands that I had soldered together.
Oh,
So
wow.
inside the wedding band is still the engraving of their love. So their love is my love and is on my finger every day.
That's fantastic. That really is. And let me ask you, Nelson, I know this is supposed to be the final edition, but I mean, is there a chance down the road there could be a fourth one?
Well, I don't know what you call that. There's a trilogy is three. What is it? A quadrology, a quartet? I
Yeah.
don't know what you would call that. But well, the book
Or
goes up
maybe an
to
extended, like version of each book. That
an
could happen too.
epilogue. Maybe it's an
Yeah.
epilogue. But the happily ever after goes up until my wedding. Spoiler alert! It goes up until my happily ever after, time frame wise, which was 2023. So the final book takes us up to 2023, and here we are. 3 years has passed since then, and I've cranked out all three books in the last 3 years. But sure, I mean, things are still going to happen to me. They won't be quite as steamy as they used to be. And if you're a fan of the series, you might be a little disappointed in how tame the fourth book would be. So that's why, dun dun dun, how's this for a transition? That is why the next book, my 12th book, which is coming out for Earth Day, April
Right.
22nd.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is my first children's book, and my editor panicked when I said, okay, I've got an idea for a children's book. I really want to do this. And he's like, a children's book? After all the books you've written with all that steamy adult content, would you like to write it under a pen name? And I said, no, I'm very proud of my name, and I'm very proud of my work, and I'm capable of writing a G-rated, wonderful, entertaining children's story. And hence, I had to look no further than my own terrace full of flora and fauna. And I also have a rooftop cabana, which is very unusual in New York, full of flora and fauna. And I'm so devoted to my maple trees and my juniper bushes and my boxwoods and all my assorted things, outdoor things, that I saw a book. And the new book is called The Magnificent, I don't have a copy of the book yet, so here's a little card, The Magnificent Mr. and Mrs. Maple. And it is the almost true love story of my two maple trees who have to live apart. One lives on the terrace and one lives in the cabana. But it's a love story that hopefully will teach children that families can still be families and love each other even when they're not living together. Because a lot of families these days are not the kind of family unit we think of as mom and dad and brother and sister under the same roof. People are more spread out now. And it's that about the invisible bonds of family. And what I sort of lucked into, so much of my career has been luck and timing and serendipity. And a friend of mine from social media is a gerontologist, Carrie Burnite. She's a best-selling New York Times author, and she writes about quality aging. And I asked her to write the foreword because I thought she'd have an interesting perspective on kids. And she wrote a beautiful foreword that opens the book. But that's when it occurred to me that the book can also help old people. And that sounds, old people sounds like it's derogatory, but it's not. There are young people, there are middle people, and there are old people. I've been young, I've been middle, and I'm approaching the old. But that's the cycle of life. And a lot of older people are faced with relocation. They may not get to live with their family forever. My mother went into assisted living. That was very hard for all of us, but that's life in 2026 and beyond. So the book actually addresses the same themes for the elderly as it does for the very young. And I'm hoping to promote the book by bringing old and young together for story times and having old people read it to young people and young people read it to old people and go to nursing homes and go to schools and mix up this group, because I'm very interested in both ends of the spectrum. And gosh, we're more alike than we are unalike.
Right. And I think that's a wonderful idea. I mean, and like anything else, you could teach children a lot by, as you said, children go through divorced homes and, things like that. It's not easy. So you kind of, could make them understand that you can get through life even if your parents aren't together. And books like this give you, they help you cope in a way, if you think about it.
I hope so. And it's, I just wrote it from the heart. And it's not a short little, I'm going to read it to you before bed, Dr. Seuss book. It's 59 pages and it's 3 distinct chapters. And I think it's the kind of book you could read over the course of several nights. The way, when I grew up, that was the A.A. Milne Winnie the Pooh books. There were stories and you got a little bit more each night. So it was something to look forward to. And I think that's how it is with Mr. and Mrs. Maple.
Right. And Nelson, I think, and I don't think anybody is getting the wrong idea, but one thing people need to understand about your books, they're not sleazy. And that's the important thing. Like, that's to keep in mind. It's like any book you read, there's always going to be, like you said, some steaminess, but that doesn't mean sleazy. And that's the important thing, because if you read the books, you'll see that a lot of it is very it's great writing as well.
Thank you. I'm very proud of it. Yeah, and actually, even the sexual content in some of them, it amuses me because I get a lot of feedback from people saying how much they were titillated by it, and how much it really worked for them. So I'm very flattered that I have that writing ability. It was funny, in January of 2026, I was commissioned to be a keynote speaker on the Queen Mary 2 for the Titanic book, Kindred Spirits. And it was a transatlantic voyage from Southampton, England to New York City, the original route the Titanic was to take. So this was very thrilling for me that I was going to get to be a speaker and do 3 speaking engagements on board in the beautiful ship, in the beautiful theater. And then we would be passing over the wreck site of Titanic. And I thought, oh, this is going to be so emotional for me and so wonderful. And I'll be able to go out on deck and have a moment of silence for the victims of Titanic, maybe some of the passengers who might be maritime enthusiasts as well. And I did get to do just that, although it was a terrible storm at that point. We were rocking all over the place, and you really weren't supposed to be out on deck. We're all holding on to ropes to just go out there for a moment. But we were having a book signing on the ship, and people were I sold a lot of books. Jackie Collins would be proud. And all these people were lined up. They had purchased the book from the vendor, and then they were standing in line to have them sign it. And one gentleman, very enthusiastic about the book and enjoyed it as well. But he told me the fellow he was standing behind in line was flipping through the book and was shocked and aghast at whatever juicy page he had happened to turn to. And the other fellow said to him, he's like, mate, you already bought it, so you might as well get it signed. So like Jackie said, you don't have to like it, but I think you'll be entertained by it.
Right. Nelson, one of the things I think is important in the type of work you do is there's going to be long days. There's going to be some stress along the way. It's not always easy. So you have to, I don't want to say humor yourself, but you have to not take yourself so serious. And, I know you guys have played pranks on each other, and I know you got Jodie Foster once with it. You were able to, pull a joke on her. Talk about that a little bit. That had to be fun.
Yeah, I mean, I've interviewed so many celebrities. You want to try, and a lot of these celebrities will just crank out interview after interview. So you not only want to make it original for yourself so that your audience has something that they can see only from you, but the celebrities, are doing the same thing over and over and over. So they like a break too. In the case of Jodie, I hadn't met her before. It was I've interviewed her several times. I knew we had a mutual friend. So I flew to Canada to interview Jodie for this particular project she was doing. And I arranged for my friend, who was very close friends with her, to text me as I was entering the room. So when I entered the room, hello, Miss Foster, how do you do? I'm Nelson, whatever. I was like, oh, excuse me, I've got a text, which she would have thought would be insanely rude for the reporter to stop everything and take a text. But I was like, oh no, it's for you. And I handed her the phone, and she got into a text exchange with our mutual friend. And that certainly broke the ice. It made for a cute way to start the interview, and we had a great one. So then consequently, the next time I interviewed her, we were like old friends. We ended up at a wedding together. We ended up sitting together at the wedding because by now we were old friends. Interestingly, Hugh Jackman was at that same wedding, and we ended up singing together for the bride. But that's another story. And the celebrities do that too. Like I've had, John, what's his name? Emily Blunt and Emily Blunt's husband. Help me out here. From The Office.
Oh God.
John Krasinski.
Yes.
So yeah, I was interviewing Emily, and John burst into the room, which it didn't interrupt me. It was fun. So it was a very fun, bespoke, special interview because I had the two of them together, and that kind of thing. Tina Fey and Margot Robbie played a joke on me when I came into the room to interview them. They turned the tables on me, and they had gone to Google and found out like 2 or 3 fun facts about me and said, oh, we hear this about you. And they interviewed me for that. So, that's the fun of the job. You really never know what you're going to get from day to day.
Right. And speaking of friends, Nelson, someone you've had a great friendship with, Anna, I've always tried to get her on. It's never going to happen, but Jamie Lee Curtis, and
Ah,
what a credit to the industry. She's just been tremendous. But talk about that friendship, because what I've always heard about Jamie Lee Curtis is you would never know she was a celebrity unless you knew who she was, because she always is very humble and always treats everybody the way people would want to be treated.
and that is because she has evolved. And I first met Jamie when I first moved to LA in 19 I moved to LA in 1990. I would have met her in 1991 or 92. She used to have a sitcom with Richard Lewis and Ann Magnuson called Anything But Love. A sitcom. It lasted, I don't know, 3 seasons maybe. And I was hired to play Richard Lewis as a teenager in a flashback shot. And it was mostly because I had the same long mullet hairdo that Richard Lewis had at the time. And I worked on that show, and Jamie Lee was not an easy person. She publicly talks about her life before she got sober and how troublesome she could be at times. She was not kind to me, and it was not a happy experience working on the show. Flash forward, I don't know, 10, 15 years. She's sober. I've become a reporter. We're totally different people now. And I interviewed her for whatever it was. And I said to her, oh, you probably won't remember me because I've lost all my hair. But I played Richard Lewis as teenage Marty. I was teenage Marty on that episode of Anything But Love. And she was flabbergasted. And I think part of her realized how she was back in those days, because she went overboard in embracing me and welcoming me and trying to make me feel good. I think she, in a way, she was trying to make amends for her former self.
Right.
And hey, you can't live in this world unless you're forgiving. And who hasn't done things that need forgiveness? And that set off a whole chain of, whenever she was doing a project, I would interview her. Most memorably when she did it was one of the Halloween movies, the sequel where she had a daughter, and the daughter, it was a reboot. I think it was just called Halloween, even though it was like the third or fourth or 12th Halloween movie. But she was shooting it in Georgia or South Carolina, somewhere. I had to get on a plane and fly somewhere. We had the best time hanging out. And these are the cumulative effects of when you are doing what you do for a long time and you make these relationships. We ended up on a red carpet together. I was getting an award. I was getting a journalism award, and she was getting an award for. It was the same red carpet show. I was getting an award for journalism. She was getting an award for acting. And we ran into each other on the red carpet, and she was hugging and kissing and loving. And I truly believe no one was happier for me about that award than Jamie Lee was.
That's awesome. That
and
really
maybe my mother. But yeah, she's a great person. She speaks her mind. You don't have to agree with everything she says, but she's a great ambassador for Hollywood and a good lady.
Right. Absolutely. And I was thinking about so many people you interviewed, Nelson, and one of the ones that really fascinates me, and we lost her about 3 years ago, is the legendary Betty White. And I mean, she was just phenomenal. I mean, how rewarding was it to interview somebody with the credentials she had? And she's very funny as well.
But surprisingly, also a very fine dramatic actress. We all grew up. Jesus, she was almost 100 years. She was just shy of her 100th birthday when she passed away. She passed away on New Year's Eve day, I believe.
Yeah.
Because I had just moved into this apartment. We didn't have anything hooked up yet. And I had told my bosses, when the sad day arrives that Betty White passes, no one but I am allowed to report on it, because my history with Betty goes back to 1991. She was my first celebrity interview. If you go onto YouTube and type in Nelson Aspen, Betty White, you can see I had me and my hair, and Betty was such a good sport. She had us over to her house, and by us, I mean me and a cameraman. And it was about pet fitness. And she put on a whole aerobics class for her dogs. And we had a wonderful interview about pets and about aging. And she was only in her 60s then. So it's quite amazing. But it was very important to me because she was my first celebrity interview, and I've had 1,000 since then. But there's something about Betty White. She might actually be the best of them all. And people say, "Oh, what kind of celebrities do you like to interview? You know, the hunky ones, the Oscar-winning ones, or whatever." And I like to interview the older stars, like a Betty White, a Clint Eastwood, a Julie Andrews. I
Yeah.
guess Meryl Streep's getting up there now, so I guess we can put her up there too. But they have the most stories to tell. They're the most interesting. They don't give a crap, so they'll just tell you. They're not paranoid and feeling like, oh, I better not say this, that, or the other thing. They really let it all hang out, and they do have the best stories.
Right. Nelson, I would say one of the toughest things in what you do is when you have to cover people who have passed away. That can't be fun. And, I think of you covered Robin Williams' death, which had to be very, I don't, had to shake you up a little bit based on the circumstances. But how hard is it for a reporter to have to, it's always good when you could cover happy moments like the Oscars, the Golden Globes, all that stuff. But when you have to cover people that pass away, especially when it's sudden as well, that cannot be fun.
Fun is not the right word, but it is a stimulating challenge. Nothing gets my adrenaline up like breaking news, whether that's an arrest, a death, an accident, a birth, a divorce announcement, something shocking is what journalism is all about. So it is a real rush when something like that happens. And I, over the years, sort of became the go-to guy for celebrity death. And that sounds morbid, but it was not only because, as recently as Robert Redford, I was called upon to do something on Robert Redford's death recently, because I've interviewed them all. I have personal experiences with them all. So aside from my knowledge of their career, I'm able to add usually some personal perspective from knowing them or having interviewed them, or just my knowledge of their lives. Robin Williams is a good example because I was live on the air when the news came in, and I had done a movie with Robin when I was a teenager, so I was able to recall him, what he was like on the set, away from a performance, just hanging out on the set for days on end with him. I interviewed him several times, and I would always bring up that film to him, which was a very small film called, I think it was called Seize the Day. Ironically, after Good Will Hunting, Seize the Day, Carpe Diem. But no, the film was called Seize the Day, based on a novel by Saul Bellow. And I would interview Robin for whatever big budget film he was doing. And I would remind him, I'm like, oh, you remember we worked together on Seize the Day? And then, in true Robin Williams fashion, that all he wanted to do was talk about Seize the Day and how it was one of the best experiences of his life. So to be able to share these kind of little personal reflections when a death occurs is a special privilege. And the great star of the silver screen, Deborah Carr, The King and I, From Here to Eternity, Tea and Sympathy. I mean, the list, Affair to Remember, come on. She passed away. I remember I asked my producers, oh, Deborah Carr has passed away. And the producer, who was like 4 years old, is like, who? I'm like, please give me 30 seconds to acknowledge the passing of Deborah Carr. And all I need is the footage of her kissing Burt Lancaster on the beach and From Here to Eternity as the waves are rolling. Remember, it's a very iconic scene of the two of them in a clutch with the waves pouring over them. It was very scandalous for its time I think in the 50s. So they queued up that, and like, all I need is 30 seconds, because I wanted to explain to the audience, who probably didn't have any idea who Deborah Carr was, how important she was to the film industry. If it hadn't been for that scene and From Here to Eternity, there wouldn't be contemporary love scenes. That was the most graphic thing of its time. It's amazing it got past the censors, because her character was a married woman, and here she is in the surf with the unmarried man. So it's a real privilege when I get to do that. And incidentally, when Betty White passed away, I couldn't get to a studio. It was snowing. I had no equipment in the apartment. I literally was doing through the phone a live shot. I think it was by Skype to report on Betty.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So let me ask you, Nelson. First, I'll start with the magnificent Mr. and Mrs. Maple.
Yay!
Is there, obviously, you got to see how everything goes with the book and, the interests and things like that. But is this a one and done book, or do you see an opportunity to expand on it?
I think it will probably, I never say never, because once I get an idea in my head, I can't rest until it's executed. But I think Mr. and Mrs. Maple will stand on its own. It will be its own entity. It is also my 12th book. And writing a book, whether it's a short children's book or a longer trilogy or a historical fantasy, whatever the genre is, it's a lot of work. And I figure, okay, 12 books. I don't need to write any more than that. I can now spend the rest of my life promoting the books that I have instead of worrying about what's next. Famous last words, you never know. There might be another one up my sleeve. And Kindred Spirits, the Titanic book, is being developed as a motion picture. So that's a whole new world to explore. And I'm not writing it. It's a rather distinguished person with a rather highbrow Titanic pedigree. He produced the Netflix documentary Titan, the Ocean Gate disaster, and he dove down 3 times on the submersible. And he read my book and he's like, I want to make this into a movie, and we're in the process.
Right. Now, obviously, the magnificent Mr. and Mrs. Maple comes out on, like you said, Earth Day, April 22nd. How can we get the book?
I'm chewing on my nails now because until I get a copy in my hand, it's killing me that I only have this postcard at the moment. I need the book because I'm planning some events already. The weekend before Earth Day, my landscaper who created my urban oasis, he's based here in Harlem as well. And we're going to do a story time the weekend before Earth Day, where I'll have celebrity readers read the story to assembled kids and hopefully some grannies as well. And then on Earth Day, we'll have a launch here in New York City. All the details will be on my website. But until I get the book in my hand, I can't do anything. But they have promised me I will have it by the beginning of April. When it's available, I'll be announcing and singing it from the rooftops on all my social media and all the website. But of course, you will be able to get it on Amazon. That's always old reliable. You'll be able to get it on Amazon, as you will with all my books. In fact, the Raindrops trilogy, they're also available in Kindle, and one of them, soon all of them, available in Audible as well. So that's pretty cool. And Kindred Spirits, I haven't listened to it because it's not my voice, but Kindred Spirits also has an Audible. I shudder to think how they say the bad words, but we'll see.
And it's kind of cool, Nelson, that both books are kind of out at the same time, and you could really, kind of pick and choose, and you could order both and start with one and then go on to the next one. So it's like, it gives you.
I like the way you sell. There's something for everybody.
Yeah. So I think that's great as well. And to me, for somebody like you, that's a writer and you've done all this, it's got to be an exciting time for you because this month and next month, it's just going to explode for you as far as, everything that you've got going on. I mean, that's what makes all the long hours, all the, 7 days a week sometimes, and, being tired and things like that makes it all worth it because this is what the end result is.
Yeah. And I have all my books, stacked together on the bookshelf. And when I got the new one, when I got Happily Ever After, I stuck it in next to this one and I'm like, oh, you have a new brother or sister. And it's really sweet. I have 12 children to enjoy. I've been very excited that I've been invited to participate in the East Hampton Library's annual Authors Weekend in East Hampton, Long Island this August. It's very prestigious. You know, you've got Katie Couric sitting on one side of you, and Martha Stewart sitting on the other side of you, and over there is a Pulitzer Prize winner, and you know, I'll just be there with my dirty trilogy. But they also have a kids' day, and I'll be doing Mr. and Mrs. Maple on the kids' day. And then in October, I'm leading a tour of Ireland. So Mike, if there's anywhere in Ireland you haven't been, this October, I'm taking folks on a 2-week tour, starting in Dublin, all around Ireland, culminating in Belfast at the Titanic Museum. So all those details are on my website as well. And it's October 2nd to the 14th. And it's going to be great. It's 13 days, 18 meals, and you get to see everything in Ireland, whether it's the Titanic Museum or kissing the Blarney Stone or visiting the Guinness brewery. It's exciting.
Yeah, that really is. And like I said, it's a very exciting time for you, Nelson. And here's the thing, too. I mean, as a guy who lived in Los Angeles, lived in New York, I mean, I got to believe down the road there's going to be a project where New York meets Los Angeles or something like that, because I know that you could tell a great story with that. And I have to believe with your creativity, your innovativeness, this will happen someday.
Well, it depends on how well I sleep, because I get these little brainstorms in the middle of the night, and I think, oh, I'll write that down in the morning. And then I might forget it in the morning. I better write it down now. And the next thing you know, I'm in my office working. So I guess I'll take a break when I'm gone. But for now, you're right. I just work.
Right. Well, Nelson, I really appreciate you giving me a few minutes today. And when this book, comes out sometime in May, I'd like to have you back on so we could talk about it once I read it and things like that, because I really believe that there's so much, we will have so much fun discussing the different chapters and things like that. And I can't wait to read it. So keep doing what you're doing. I really appreciate all the work you do, and best of luck with the books, but I know they're going to be a home run. So thank you again.
You're very kind, Mike. Thank you for the hospitality. I'm so grateful.
Really appreciate it. And folks, Nelson is a credit. I said this last time, I'll say it again. He's a credit to the field he works in, to authors everywhere. I mean, the man tells stories, but he tells great ones. He tells stories that, we all could benefit from, and they always have a great theme to them. And this is just one of so many things he's done in his life. So don't ever underrate the type of writer Nelson is, the type of reporter he is, what he's done throughout his life, because every time he goes out there, I just said this, he always seems to hit a home run. And we're really lucky to be able to look at his work, read it, and just tremendous talent all the way around. For In the Spotlight, I'm Mike Kenichi saying good night, everyone.